Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are, whenever you are looking at this, watching this. Welcome. This is, we're actually at episode 8 now. Been doing this for a few weeks and keeping it going, which is wonderful. Today I have a wonderful, wonderful man, Keith Whatling. He is... I said it in the post, he's inimitable. If you've met Keith Whatling, you will know. He's a force of nature. He's fantastic, and I'm going to bring him on now, and he can introduce himself to the audience out there. So, hello, Keith, you're live.
They
Please
don't
do
call me
introduce yourself.
Keith inimitable Whatling for nothing, you know. I didn't realise you'd had 8 other push mucks on this, or 7 other push mucks on this show of yours, Reese.
7? Yep, 7 so far.
That's pretty impressive.
One of those never actually managed to get live because I stupidly didn't actually broadcast it live. So I'm quite upset about that one because it was one of my favorites. It was with my mentor, I suppose you could say, one of my first bosses in consulting, and we had a great chat. He's a really good guy. I've known him for years, but it didn't record. So there's that whole hour just disappeared. We had a great time. No one will ever get to see it. So I've got to get him on again. But yes, yeah, I've had 7 people. Keegan was our first, and yeah, it's been great. And next up, I can't say yet because I don't tell anyone what the next one is until I've fully 100% got it confirmed, just in case.
Nice.
So far I've been doing that sort of the Saturday or Sunday the day before. I'm hoping for this one I'll put it out a little bit sooner. I'll tell you who it is later, but hopefully it does go forward from there. But yeah,
they might not come on after I've been here, mate.
That's true. That's true. It's a high bar to live up to.
God, say.
So how did you? So the show is I call it light entertainment in the world of Power Platform and community. It's really me chatting to people in the community that I've met, that I know. So far it's been mostly people that I do know. One person I didn't know. That was a really good chat as well, Reti. But it's about community. It's how you got into this. How did you get into the world of Power Platform and the community side? Because your story is an interesting one. And it came up actually when I was talking to Lucy last week, when she talked about the fact you were a bus driver and your story. And
that's such a crock of crap.
That was a long time ago as well. I really want...
Honestly, never let the truth get in the way of a good marketing story when it comes to a big firm like Microsoft, honestly. So the bus driver thing, yeah, I did. I drove a bus. I also cleaned dog shit out of people's back gardens as a kid, but they don't say he is the dog shit cleaner who made apps because that doesn't exactly sell...
Nope.
Sell licenses, does it? But I was working for public transport. I'd been I'd done web design and graphic design and like tech stuff at college and that. I'd done like a multimedia course way back in the day. And you remember when CD-ROMs were all there was, and that internet was never going to catch on. Never going to catch on. It wasn't. It was that HTML wasn't a real programming language. I was there. I remember when I saw the first tessellated HTML background. It was a jigsaw.
Tessellated?
Yeah. Everyone was on this one website, kept crashing because it had a proper... So it was like an infinite... You could pull the browser as wide as you like. And it was voodoo back in those days, but it was the future. And yeah... And there was all the web designers going, "Oh, it's just great," and all the traditional print media using Quark Express going, "Oh, not proper designers." And to be honest with you, I still don't think web design really is an equal of some print stuff. Like very, very rarely do you see incredible design like you used to with print. I think there's just a little bit like it's smaller print. It's less dynamic. It doesn't move, and you've got a certain amount of real estate to spend, and you spend a lot of time on it. you spent a lot of time on that
I think
A4
web
piece of
technology
paper.
is a different thing to media in many ways. The classic sort of media of, I mean, is it? So my gut feel is that web development, web design is functional. It's all about functional. It can look good, but it should be functional. It should be first and foremost, can I use it? I need a website to be quick. I need it to be secure. I need it to be something that I can browse my products and buy things nice and easily. I don't need it to look fancy. I don't need it to be
And that
slick.
needed to make me feel,
Yeah.
you know.
And I think that's whether for good or for bad, that's kind
But
of
an
where it is.
old school graphic design, Jan Schickold, he was one of the original, like, back when Lautrec, it was he was into sort of like, if you looked at his letterheads and stuff, there was one letterhead he put together, and it sort of he typed it out, and it looks like a modern dance poster that you'd see sellotaped to a lamppost. It's like, it's so industrial, but it's like everything on there as a function, like design coined that form follows function phrasing, and like, yeah, okay, like good user centric design is and can be beautiful, but I don't know. It kind of, there's a little bit of artistry. I mean, there was a website back in the day, Pray Station, um, which is really weird site. I can't remember the name of the guy who put it together, but it had all these weird like design experiments in HTML and
Nice.
CSS and JavaScript. It was really cool.
I've seen
It was
stuff
really
like that in the
cool.
past because I was into the web development when I was younger as well, playing around with GeoCities and back in the day and mucking about with JavaScript. Still do. But I remember one of the ones that really stood out back then. Sony had a beautiful website. Like at the time, I can't remember. This must have been 98, 97, 98. They had a website that did stuff with the mouse pointer that I'd never seen before. Like you could
Yeah.
drag stuff around and it would bounce around. Like it was at that time when people were playing with the idea of like gravity sort of animations. So you could throw a ball around and it would bounce kind of stuff.
Yeah, a bit of flash, bit of magical,
And I just
don't.
remember going to it. I went to that site so many times at school just because it looked cool. I was just like, this is, I don't care what it is. It just looks really cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of it looked really cool, but it didn't necessarily do anything.
Nope, nope, very much so. So you studied web and design and various things
No, I
like
didn't
that
really.
in
I mean,
college.
I didn't study any of that. It was really the progenitor of Power Platform, I think. I mean, it's just the same stuff, different day. It's like a higher and higher level programming language. So I did Macromedia, which is now Adobe, Macromedia Director, Macromedia Authorware,
Was
which
that
wasn't.
Flash?
No,
No, okay,
no,
different.
no. Director was totally different, and then Authorware, which was like very much like Power Automate, but with screens. It even had the little screen flow and conditional statements and all sorts of stuff in it. And it was drag and drop, WYSIWYG,
Yep.
just like Canvas apps, but it spat out an executable.
I mean, that's been the thing that a lot of companies have been chasing for a long time. Again, going back to sort of early programming for me, the Visual Basic. I mean, Visual Basic was the
Mobile.
the prototypical point and click thing that made Windows applications. Microsoft back then, they're just redoing the same stuff in many ways. It's the same concept.
Yeah.
So it's what goes around comes around. This you touch on a point, and we've talked about this in the past, where I think that so many Power Platform developers or Dynamics developers or XRM developers, whatever they want to call themselves, get so pigeonholed in, I'm going to use the platform and I'm going to use this tool and only this tool. And they don't necessarily care about programming or the technology.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
I think that there's a lot to be said for cross-scaling into other technologies, other platforms, other
I
programming
don't think you're
languages.
a programmer if you can just write a plugin and do JavaScript. That's not you're not a programmer. I expect you to know Python, know Haskell, know Scala, know Java. Like, I expect you to have coded meaningfully in another language. Like the you learn so much from doing those, and you're seeing just people come to it who have kind of. I do think there's a propensity these days for the AI coder. I've
The
seen it,
vibe
you know.
coding. Oh,
Oh, don't get me started on that nonsense. But like,
I
it's this. What I mean is that like charlatans turning up, going like, I can code, being able to pass the interview, and then getting in there and just being able to sort of like make it work somehow with Chat GPT, and
thing is, I
it's
think that's always been the case. As long as I've been in this industry, I've seen that because it you can get away with a lot with very little knowledge, and there are so many people out there that are putting blog posts out on how to do this or that or the next thing that people copy and paste and solve their problems by doing that. Which is in some ways the dark side of community, which is an interesting one because I think there's a lot of developers out there in the Power Platform world that don't know what they're doing. They're literally copying and pasting something, having a look at it, testing it. It works, great, move on. I think if you're going to copy and paste from someone else, you need to understand what that code is doing
Mhm.
so that you
Yep.
understand what you're doing there and how you could maybe do it better. But I think a lot of people don't. I think a lot of people do just copy and paste their way through getting somewhere.
Yeah, the guy who taught me Python on Team Treehouse, a guy called Kenneth Love. He was bloody brilliant. One of the best coding teachers I've ever had. It was all online, but like
Mhm.
and videos and things. But he really made it come alive. Like he really kind of when he taught, it made sense, right? And he used to talk about like it's so much easier to write code than read code. I mean,
That's true.
like,
That is very true.
it's painful reading somebody else's code,
Yeah.
but I think that's probably like the first skill you should have. So I think of coding these days a little bit like um, Indian drumming. These the tablas, right? So they've got
I don't
these
know. No.
two drums and they're different tones, and where you hit
Right.
on the
Okay.
drum is a
Yeah. Yeah.
different tone, and it's got this rhythm to it. It's incredible, absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Mhm.
And to learn this, at least this is what I was told years and years ago when I was really into music. You spend in upwards of sort of 10, 15 years, and anybody from that diaspora, please correct me if I'm wrong, but learning the language of the drum before you're even allowed to play the damn thing. So
Mhm.
you learn this like verbal language, this like, and each you have to be able to speak it verbally before you can play it.
All right.
So and each bit of the drum's got a different sound, and like you can hear these guys who've learned the tabla like this dark and all this kind of, and you're like, what the heck is that? How are they doing that so quickly? And it's you know a decade worth of learning how to do it, and they play the drum, and it's amazing. But my point is, rather ineloquently made as usual, and with far too many words, that like coding is a little bit like that. Like if you
Mhm.
can only write code and not read it, somebody else's, not take the time to be able to decipher it and understand it, then you're in trouble. And it's the same. Like I keep having this argument with people about TypeScript, right? Everyone's like, I need to write everything in TypeScript. And I'm like, okay, but like JSDoc will do you a really good job and you won't have to compile it, right? And
Yeah.
the IntelliSense will work and pick up JSDoc. Like, why do you need to complicate this further for a bit of form script for a bloody model driven form? You do not. Yeah, if you're doing a PCF, fine, go off to the races, go do. But like, just a bit of JSDoc, which means that you had to comment your code and write what it was about, rather than cheating and using a superset of JavaScript to get around a problem that just creates a coding mess.
Mhm. I'm with you on that as well. I'm not a big fan of introducing more than you need to actually get the job done. Like even
Correct.
even PCF controls. I've implemented a few PCF controls recently, and I didn't need React. Why did I need React to do that? There was no need to introduce the React library to do a little form PCF, like a little field PCF. So
Yeah.
do it with simple, basic, native, vanilla JavaScript and HTML. But I think a lot of people just they don't they don't have our background. Like, I think you and I
Got
have a
to do
similar
it in
interest.
React, Reese. What you're talking about, you're not professional if you don't do it that way. If you don't overcomplicate it, that's not That's not. You can't charge for that unless you make it ridiculously complicated, mate.
Yeah, it does feel that way sometimes. But
If it
anyway,
was,
I want
if
to
it
go
was
back.
simple,
I want to
if
go
it was
back to Power
simple,
Platform starting. How did you fall into Power Platform? You were at buses. Is that where you first came across Power Platform?
yeah. So I've been mucking around on the buses for years. After I got made redundant when the dot-com bubble burst, way back when I was working in investment banking and all sorts of stuff, doing e-guides, e-learning, when everything had an E or an I in front of it to be
Yep.
technological. And if it didn't
Yep.
have an E or an I, it was no good. Right?
The
Now you've
irony
got
is
to
they
have
drop all the
verse.
E's now. Everything has to
Yeah.
drop the E.
Well, now the thing is, now E's out the window. You've
Yep.
got verse and you've got I, but as a suffix, not as a prefix,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yes.
so yeah. Um, and I'd got made redundant, and I was bumming around, and I was doing door to door sales, which is a hilarious experience. I was working for one of these gas and electric providers, knocking on doors and ripping off old grannies, and anybody else who'd sign a bit of paper. Um, but yeah, that was fun. And one day it was pouring down with rain, and I hadn't made any sales, and I just saw this bus drive past, and it said earn, I think it was like 350 quid a week driving this bus, and I was like, yeah, well, it's wet, it's raining. I genuinely didn't want to get back into what then I thought was like this design industry, this artistic industry that was the because I'd been a graphic designer. I'd transitioned from college to graphic design to working in web design for friends doing this e-guides thing,
Yeah.
e-learning thing, which was sort of multimedia but on the web. And I was like, I took that industry as a bad industry. And I had a friend, and one of the guys I grew up with, a guy called Simon Attridge, who was a real technological whiz kid back in the day, like brilliant, brilliant. And his dad was just incredible at technology, really, really incredible. And the whole family would like BBC Micro nerds, like just writing code like it was going out of fashion. I can hold a candle to him. Anyway, he'd gone to university. I hadn't. He'd gone to university. He had a job in PC World. My mum was like, "Oh, maybe this technology thing won't take off. These computers and all the rest of it." So I thought, no, stuff it. My dad had worked for 35 years for a building firm. He'd had a great time. And I thought, yeah, the buses seemed like a bit of a giggle. So I jumped in there, and they always joke about once you start driving a bus, you never stop, and it's true. The camaraderie and the brotherhood and sisterhood, or whatever you want to call it, of bus drivers is pretty tight knit. They're really lovely people. They're like the archetypal grumpy bus driver. Yeah, well, we're all grumpy bus drivers, so that's your problem, not my problem. And it was lovely. It was lovely. I found this wonderful family of people who were all, we used to call it herding a bus full of ungrateful idiots for a sea of arseholes in, in London. And it really was like, it was just, it was brilliant, And then I got a job as an official, and that was like meant I had to control the services and play bus chess in my head. And you got a score at the end of the day, which means it was a gamified experience. And the score, it was none of it was digital. It was all with a sort of a wax crayon and on a bit of paper, on a wipe clean slate that you had
Yeah.
to mark the buses off when they went past, and you had to write them down on a bit of paper called the BRR, the bus running record, the BRR. You had to fill one of these in, or you get your knuckles wrapped, and you had to figure out how to run the service and make it appear to the very ungrateful London public that that the service was running on time even when it was an hour late. They didn't know. They don't know. Like, people go, "Oh, the bus is late." Well, in London, there's one every 10 minutes, so it's like it's late, but defined late. Like that bus is 2 hours late, but it came 10 minutes after the last one. So how do you know? Right? Just like the arms and legs hanging out the window, and the dog's done a poo on the floor because it can't go to the loo because it's been there in traffic for 4.5 hours. But yeah, don't worry about that. So I did that for ages. And then one of the guys, a guy called Craig Pease, wonderful human being he was. He'd sort of built this. We had these paper-based, like literal carbon copy sheets of paper that we had to write out to record all of the calls when we were in the office. So TfL, in their infinite wisdom as Transport for London, they built on this system called, ready for this? iBus.
iBus.
Not E-bus, iBus. E-bus was up north, right? Oh, the lights are gone, just reminding me it's 9:30 to go to bed. Yeah, E-bus was round Yorkshire. But iBus was in London. Oi, bus! And they spent millions of pounds on this thing. And it was basically they digitised the buses because they had like some radios and stuff, and you could roughly see where they were, but the drivers used to take the piss all day long. And basically, all transport technology is pretty much based around making the drivers not being able to take the piss, either taking money that they're not stealing money out of the cash tray, or hiding at the end of the route, not driving the bus. Right? Genuinely, seriously, all of it is designed around stopping that happening. No other reason. And they put that in, and it was like we had to write down all these calls. And I remember I bought myself a Lamy pen, right, with 3 colours in it, because you had to write different colours. If it was a code red, which meant they called the police from the bus, code red, then code blue, which was slightly less important, which was just annoying. And then you had like this normal one, the normal code. And I'll never forget this Irish guy I worked with, Chris. He was brilliant. And he's like, you need to go code green, because the button in the bus was green to press. Code green! He was screaming down the radio at people. Anyway, so like we had this carbon copy sheet of paper, and the mileage, recording the mileage is a bit that the buses didn't run, was a real bone of contention. So he'd put together this Excel sheet, and he couldn't keep it up to date because the matrix in the background that looked the mileage up was always wrong, because you could not keep it up to date. We had 100 odd routes, and every other week there'd be a mileage grid come out that meant that you had to work those calculations out dynamically. So what we did was we put this little system together in Excel that used some quite interesting like lookup technology, not VLOOKUP, but like index match with offsets and drop downs and all the rest of it, and tons of VBA. And we'd never written anything like that before, so he and I just got on with it. And I really went to town learning VBA and got better and better and better at it. And he did like the management bit, so he was kind of like solution architect, sort of product owner, just telling it to the business, and I did this. And then he kind of got folded into the role that he was doing, and they kind of allowed me to write more and more code and run the whole thing, and they seconded me and all the rest of it. And I ended up kind of taking that bit with him, and he held my hand and helped me go on. And he sort of we built this huge ass system of thousands of lines of VBA that didn't just record the mileage, but like pulled the time stamps off the bus stops so we could figure out where the buses were and all sorts of stuff.
Nice.
Downloaded all of the information from Oracle, from TfL's Oracle system in the background, pretended we were Firefox 9B, going in screen scraping stuff with flipping. It was crazy, man. We had a great time. But then like this guy called Phil came along, and I can't remember his surname, man, but he was a really good guy, really young guy. And he said, have you seen Microsoft Forms? Because I was like, I used to basically take an Excel spreadsheet and turn it into a user interface, cover it in VBA. I didn't ever use Windows Forms, the pop-up thing. I never used that. I just used the spreadsheet because that's what everyone knew, right? Yeah. Like the staff knew that. And I don't need any other bollocks. And I used to hide the ribbon, hide everything, right? But they knew a spreadsheet. Because I didn't like all them. I don't need them buttons. I don't need to see them buttons. Just turn them off, right? And so my mate, he said, have you seen this Microsoft Forms thing? Because it could really do could we do the accident form, and it could we do the driver report form? Could we do this form, that form? And I said, yeah, but it didn't do what my Excel sheet did, which was contextual lookups.
Yeah.
Because clean data was really, really important to us.
Hmm.
The engineering team, when I went there one day, they had all these QR codes dotted up around the wall, and that was Microsoft Forms. And they would literally like filling them out, and they beat me to it with the Canvas apps, with Power Apps. And I had a look at Power Apps. I opened it up, and I immediately thought this looks really difficult, and shut it down again. Can't be bothered to learn this. Came back 2 weeks later and pulled apart the building inspectors app.
Nice. Yep.
The building inspection template. Pulled that apart, stuck it back together again, and then built this one for kind of doing the same thing, but like going out and fixing a repair on the road on the bus.
Yeah.
And then I figured out how to do a custom connector and a map. And I put this demo together, and it was really cool. And that was the one that Microsoft found and then showed to Bill Gates, and he thought it was very good.
Wow. And that's how you started. All right, fair enough. So fast forwarding a little bit, how did you get into community? What's the Power Platform, the dynamics of Microsoft community to you?
Total fluke. That was a total fluke. That was Samir Bangar. That was that little wonderful human being that he is, and his persuasive, dulcet tones. He's like a psychotherapist, but also a mad marketing genius.
Just for anyone out there that doesn't know, this is the Heathrow.
That's Sumit. That's Sumit Saini. Yeah. No, Samir Bangar is the architect of Sumit, myself, and Martin Lee's demise. Okay. So he's this wonderful, warm human being who works for Microsoft. He'd had a sabbatical from Microsoft. He came back. He'd done all sorts of cool stuff, like worked on Internet Explorer 4, when Internet Explorer was started being cool.
Yeah.
And he just had this way. He was like, I just want to like tell you to come and tell your story, right? Just come and tell your story. And he had this Summit guy, and I was terrified of meeting Summit. Martin. I was like, I had it in my head that was going to be so much better than me, so much more technological than me, write so much more code than me, know so much more about technology than me, and I was just going to be this completely inferior human being. And I still feel like that. But the long and the short of it was, Samir just said, look, there's this thing we're doing where we tell stories about people doing cool stuff with this thing, and the idea is that they're citizen developers, and it's going to be a different gig as opposed to some of the other technologies that Microsoft have had, with the exception of people like the Excel community and the Access community. But they'd never really been like, I'd never seen, and don't get me wrong, I'd followed Chip Pearson and Mr. Excel. They were like, like there wasn't a bit of code that I'd written that did anything serious. It hadn't got one of Chip Pearson's libraries in it somewhere, or hadn't got something from Mr. Excel, because those were my heroes, right? So yeah, and then like the next thing you know, we're meeting this guy, and they're telling our story, and there's a video, of Summit. And we're stood on stage at Microsoft, and we're telling the story. And this sound engineer came up to us at the end of the first time we ever told our story, me, Summit, and Martin together on stage. And he said, I hate this job.
Nice.
He said, I've done these Microsoft gigs for ages. He said, and I've never listened to any of the stories. He said, but you guys, for the first time I've ever really been into it. He said that was just engaged. A beautiful story. He said that just, completely changed my opinion on it. And of course, Martin, me and Summit were like, well, maybe you should make a Canvas app then. And that was it,
Marketing machine begins.
Yeah. And then we kind of got into community, and it was wonderful. An even more incredible person called Penny Coventry and Bill Ayres. They were old school SharePoint community gurus, and Sandy Usher as well. They sort of piped up and said, look, you can do this thing where you bring other people along for the ride, but just beware that in a few years' time, it might get a little bit onerous, or you might not enjoy it, or there might be some conflicts. But we were just so happy. We all ran into it willing. Oh yeah, come on, let's do this thing. Like, everyone's an app maker. Um, and then we just started bumping into these absolute unhinged maniacs who were basically islands of technology, and they were annoyed that they didn't have anyone to share their fun with, right? Um, and we started meeting these, quite frankly, bonkers positive people, and you don't meet people like this in Martin Lee at Auto Glass and Samit Saini at Heathrow Airport and Keith Whatling at Arriva Buses, right? You don't meet people like Chris Huntingford, Will Dorrington, Lucy Bourne uh, uh, in those companies, right? Like,
Yep.
people who are that positive and who are that, like, wrong in many comedic senses, but just that open and up for it, right?
Yeah.
And everyone sort of like looks at Chris Huntingford and says, there's this amazing technology guy, he's like super duper clever. Do you know what Chris's superpower is? Chris's superpower is standing in a room, right, and he can spot someone who's not involved, right? He'll see someone stood over there and he'll go, dude, come and talk, right? Will, he sees through it, the bullshit of every story, and he just gets straight to it, and he's the most humble, huge, giant,
Yeah.
flipper-footed individual you've ever met in your entire life. And Lucy is just this, she just sees an opportunity everywhere and wants people to go for it, So you meet these utter nutters who are just so super positive, and each one of them have got their own extreme personality traits that, like, bring you along for the ride. They are infectiously enthusiastic,
It's true.
with you and other people. But I would also warn many people as well and saying, look, there is the extrovert in you can may be able to take that and see the extrovert community going crazy. But there's a huge number of introverts that are scared to death of all of the extroverts, right?
Yeah.
Like, and for an introvert, Chris is a formidable, force of nature. Like, he's very loud, he's very noisy, and you might not feel that your comments or what you're going to say is going to be as cool as what Chris would say, or as funky or as amazing what Mark Smith would say, or all of that good stuff. Andrew Welch as well, another luminary of verbiage. But your introverts, people who sit there and sort of think it through. And Lee Baker's not necessarily an introvert, but my God, that man is an absolute thinking machine. The introverts have almost more to say that you need to pay attention to, and the extroverts try and bring it out of them in the community, because I see it most of the time as it's the introverts who are doing the things that really change the community, like in huge ways. Like the number of I's versus E's that are sitting behind the scenes running the community. Like they just, like, look at Aaron Randall, right? And Nathan Sweeney. Why they've got me to do the keynote a couple of times at their conferences? Why? Because they're introverts. They don't want to stand up on stage. They can't stand it. It's the last thing they want to do. Get the ginger fella, right? He talks utter shite. Get him to stand on stage and talk.
Your keynotes are phenomenal.
No, so you say, but like the point of the matter is that the community is there for you when you want it. But it's very important that if you get into it and you start chasing silly badges and honorifics like MVPs and fast track solution architects and regional directors and all of the other nonsense, right, that's out there, is it going to bring you joy? right? Like I've been an MVP for 6 years and I didn't put in for it this year, not because of the program. It just didn't bring me joy anymore.
Mm.
You know, I don't have the money to gallivant around the country anymore. I like my dinners. I'm traveling a lot for work. I'm on a really cool project and I'm massively enjoying myself. So you've got to ask yourself when you're doing it, if you are going to go off and run one of these community things, or you're going to commit to some form of, I don't know, what do you call it, habit forming torture, like Matt Collins Jones with his 400, whatever it was, power
Jeez,
automate
yeah,
videos,
every
one a
day.
day.
Yeah.
Grief. Like, it's an incredible amount of content to generate once every day. And then, like, MCJ is just like the Bible de facto. Everything you want to do in Power Automate ever is there's one there for it. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got to ask yourself if it's for you. But like the user groups, when we first started them, they were really big. And then COVID came along and it all just went a little
Yeah.
bit all over the place. And then there was an online user group every other day of the week. I don't really like them. I don't
Yeah,
really rate them.
it's an interesting one because I was talking to I think it was Janet. I'm sure it was Janet I was talking to about this. The user groups kind of they disappeared. They fell off the cliff because when I first got into Dynamics 2012 time, there was the Dynamics UG, and they were kind of the main. They were the only thing really. Like Microsoft wasn't doing anything in that space really at that time. They weren't doing their own conferences. They didn't have a community as such. They had a forum and stuff like that, but it was the UG that was kind of the place to go and ask questions and learn stuff. And then that kind of disappeared through various things. But I think that was because of the rise of the free conferences. So when Scottish Summit and D365 Saturdays started really rolling out, the user group model just disappeared from a business perspective, and I think that's why they kind of
Well, it costs
disappeared.
money.
Yeah, but I see
Unless you
it's
can
coming
find a
back.
free space to run it in, it costs a ton of money. You put the pizza on and all the rest of it. It's
Yep.
an absolute pain in the neck.
Yeah.
To do it, quite frankly. And you're not you know, after work, and if you've got crap content, and the amount of times I've been and seen crap content, 100, 200 content, you know, why would you turn up if you're not going to learn anything?
So in terms of so back in the heyday of community, so when you were really into it and you had the flexibility, the time, and the interest in it, what were the sort of things you were doing? What were you? Was it like London user groups, conferences? What were
Yeah,
you
the Power
doing?
Platform. Yeah, the UG in London was the one. And we used to make a point of trying to go to other people's,
Yeah.
like as user group leaders, we would go to other people's user groups as a gratis, because they would come to ours, which I thought was the right thing to do. It's quite a time sink. It's
Yeah.
quite an investiture. And then I think probably the best thing I saw or did, but didn't have the time to follow it through, because it's all about time.
Yeah.
And it's all about commitment from others. And if you've got a really good group of committed people, then you can do something really incredible. But you need a community, and you need to reach out to the partner network. You need to reach out to business. You need to advertise and let people know you're there, right? And you need to get Microsoft on board for doing it as well. You need to say to Microsoft that you're running this thing. Now, don't get me wrong, I hate Dynamics communities and that thing as much as you could possibly imagine, because they shafted me big time when I had absolutely no money, and I will never trust them again. But the things that worked was stuff like Prathy's Power BI user group, right? So if you're going to run one of these things, a project is a big deal. So Prathy used to have homework. They would give
Oh,
you,
wow.
because it was Power BI, right? So you had
Yeah.
this data set and you had a challenge to go and like, here's this data, here's this thing, go and do this homework, right? And I learned, who's the other great luminary that sets your homework? Donna Sarkar. Always sets your homework, right? Like, go away and do something, come back and show and tell. the worst thing you can do as well is having MVPs turn up and talk at user groups. Because I'm not being funny, quite a lot of them just regurgitating 100 stuff or regurgitating the docs because they've just learned something. Everyone wants to talk about the new kid on the block who wants to talk about the new thing that no one knows.
Yeah.
It's the AI nonsense, isn't it? Right? Like everyone's like, oh, AI. I got an error message today from Copilot that was, like the server unavailable yellow screen with the red writing on it. I got one of those from Microsoft. I ain't had one of those from Microsoft. I like my dodgy Python server used to throw those out when I was learning Django. I clicked on Copilot in the app, for goodness sakes. Like, come on, behave yourself. So, like, there's so much to peel back on our technologies. So much to peel back on our technologies. People have stopped talking about plugins. They've stopped talking about JavaScript and on forms. They've stopped talking about model-driven apps. They've stopped talking about all this stuff for the Emperor's New Clothes. Now, I was having a little jog tonight, and I thought to myself, I sound like the CRM developer, the CE developer, CE person when Power Apps came out.
Yeah.
I sound like, oh, this rubbish, this nonsense will never take off. And then the Dataverse crew as well. What are you calling it, Dataverse? And in the F&O people who still sound like that. And then the and yeah, it's the Emperor's New Clothes, but you need to pay attention to the new stuff, right? And there is space for going off and doing that new stuff well and having dedicated sessions, but do not take away from the old stuff and doing the old stuff well. How do you do plugins at scale? How are we going to migrate from the old C#, .NET framework when that gets physically deprecated by Microsoft and Dataverse is forced to move? Like, there's all these conversations that need to happen. Like, I never see anyone talking about like the best practices for TypeScript when you're writing form script, right? When you're writing for forms in model driven, like I don't see like that content anymore, right? I don't see,
But is that just a function of the world we live in where gurus are out there? So I've noticed this in the World of Power platform. We've started to see a lot more guru type content, actual content people, rather than just people sharing what they've done because they thought someone else might be interested. So I'm starting to see, like, in the whole world, the rest of the world, the last 5-10 years, social media has taken off, and you've got these influencers, and they go off and they basically do a whole bunch of content, and all they're trying to do is get as many eyeballs on their content as they possibly can, so they can get a brand deal
all day long, mate. The amount of time, like, now don't get me wrong, Shane's content's pretty good, right? But there's a whole bunch of them, and some of them will remain nameless. But you know who you are, who are just turning out crap left, right, and centre. It's got absolutely zero value, and you could have done it in a 20-second YouTube video. I do not need my Google search polluted with that utter garbage. Yeah. That's why ChatGPT's come out, because it's just people chasing bloody clicks. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to... People who did... Luminaries, amazing human beings who did stuff, and they really did break him, was Brian Dang. Like, that guy did real content that would push the boundaries with every single video he did. And if he wasn't pushing the boundaries, he was doing it properly.
Is he Power Cat now?
He threw the towel in.
Oh, because was he the guy that did games? Like he would,
isometric games in Power Apps, and then Scott Duro came along and did, and Scott, another one, pushed the boundaries of content. Now, in my mind, if you're a content creator out there and you're listening to this ginger idiot blether on, right, and you take anything from my conversation, there is one gap in this market, and you can fill it up, and you can go for it because I wanted to do it for ages, but I haven't got time. So one of you youngsters, you young whippersnappers who wants to be an MVP, can take this one up, and I guarantee you, you will get the gold seal of approval, and you'll be the greatest superstar of any Power Platform content creator in history. Right?
If I was good
I'm
at
going to
video
dangle that
editing, I would
carrot.
clip this moment. This would be what I put on TikTok.
Right? How do we reel them in? Very simple. If you want to make content for Power Platform, make the missing content. Right? The missing content for Power Platform is not a load of waffle about Canvas apps and Power Automate, nor is it a load of waffle about RPA and what's his name? Copilot, AI, Chat GPT with different clothes on. It is pro code. And I'm not talking about making content for pro code, because there's quite a lot of that out there, and you can do that. There's still a gap there for that. But there is this thing. When you start doing low code, no code, what happens? You run into a barrier. People start saying, oh, you can do an integration with Power Automate. No, you can't. It's called Power Automate, not Power Integrate. If you use it to do integration solutions, I will find you, hunt you, and kill you. And I just throw that out there, and I actually meant it. But the point is that, like, there are this bunch of low code developers who came to this platform from all walks of life. They were VBA programmers, they were just normal everyday schmucks who clicked on Power Platform, or they did app in a day and all the rest of it. And they've learned their Power Effects, and they've figured out Power Automate, and they've learned the basics of stuff. There is a bar as high as you like to jump into doing JavaScript and C#. It's this big, because you're not just writing some JavaScript on a HTML form that you've written. You're doing JavaScript that's interacting with Microsoft's bit of sausage machine. You're writing C# that's interacting with Microsoft's bit of sausage machine. You've got to deploy it. It's got to work. It's got the list. The bar is so high to get that code written, and then you've got to deploy it, and you've got to have repositories and lions and tigers and bears, right? And nobody has written the onboarding course to take your Power Platform developer, your Power Platform, like, low code, Canvas apps, custom pages developer, Power Automate if you have to, and transition them into writing JavaScript for a form properly, right? Like, well, with JS doc and functional code and all the rest of it, and and error handling and all the stuff you need to be enterprise. Canvas apps, custom pages, model driven, it's enterprise out the box. But if you start writing pro code against it, it ain't enterprise if you've not done enterprise level pro code. So you're in trouble.
That is interesting.
That is the biggest gap I've seen, and it's the same with Copilot. Same thing. Same thing. You got Copilot Studio, all the rest of it, and then whoa, you've got to start writing code for AI. And
there's a massive step up from that. I never really thought of it that way, because the point and click stuff, you can get a lot done, but you always hit a barrier. Exactly as you say, there's always limitations in the tools because of the very nature of what they are. You're always going to have that. So it's then, how do you take that next step? How do you solve the problem in a way that doesn't just make it worse? Because quite often,
and the worst bit, the bit that annoys me the most about it is I'm a Power Platform developer, right? Now hear me out. That means that I want a good user experience. That means that if my code does error, I don't want it giving a -8017642 unexpected error. I actually want to handle that error. So I'm sitting there as a business user going, well, I want to do this properly. That's why I came to Power Platform in the first place. Yet I don't know how to do this pro code, and I can't find a developer for love nor money that can do it, real developer. So yeah, that's it.
Well, that is a fantastic place to end, because we have come to the end of the show. I like to ask as the last of segment, let's say, of the show, a few rapid fire questions.
Oh, go on.
Now, say rapid fire. So, yeah.
Don't ask me the cat and dog one.
I'm
already
not going
got
to
in
ask
trouble
you a
with
cat
that
and
for
dog.
once.
We're good on that. Favorite Power Platform service?
Dataverse.
Cool. Favorite conference?
Oh, that's really hard.
Yeah.
Best one ever, Dynamics Minds.
Oh, nice. I want to go to that, but that's more of a stretch for me.
Sensational conference.
Cool. All right, maybe next year. Last music you can remember listening to?
Madonna's Borderline.
Oh, wow.
We,
This is the
we,
thing.
we have a little bit of what do you call it? Car not
Carpool
karaoke,
karaoke.
but like Russian roulette in the car with the kids. So they all allowed to pick a song one after the other. And we
Nice.
have to listen to it end to end.
I love it. And they chose Madonna. Or
No,
was it
I
you?
chose Madonna.
Okay. I was just going
Yeah.
to say that. How do they know Madonna?
No, we've been through Dolly Parton, and I had Madonna afterwards.
Nice. Podcasts or TV?
TV. I'm not. I got time to listen to your waffle, Campbell.
That's fair. It's funny, actually. I walk around with headphones in my pocket constantly because any spare moment I stick an earbud in and I just listen to podcasts. I have so many
But I tell
podcasts.
you, if you want a really good listen of something recently, somehow I started listening to Boris Johnson's biography of all people, and God, griefy, that man didn't half tell a good story.
But that's the thing that gets into a whole different. He is a phenomenal speaker, and that's why he got where he got to. That does not mean in any way, shape, or form he's a good person or politician. Well, actually, no, he's a. Anyway, that's a different. We'll talk about that another time.
Transport planner.
If you had 2 hours with no other responsibility, what would you do?
Oh, that's not for public broadcast. Actually, I would be doing my Udemy course on how to be a Power Platform pro coder. It's a really good Udemy course. I can't remember the name of the fella. He's a northern lad, but it's really good so far.
Nice. Share that with me after. I'd be interested to see what's in it.
Not best 19 quid I've spent in a long time.
Nice. Books or audiobooks?
At the moment, audiobooks, but that's because I travel a lot.
Yeah, I do like an audiobook. I find I kind of phase out when I'm listening to them, though. That's the difficulty. So I can't listen to an audiobook where I actually want to hear the content.
Yeah, you do need to read it. I've got Hat 6 up there at the moment. I keep meaning to read the Enigma thing, but I just haven't. Like, in the end of the day, I just need to sit down and put some brain rot on. I started watching Shameless. I'd never watched the series before. I was sitting there last night. I was like, God, this is the best thing I've ever watched.
I've been meaning to watch that forever, actually. I have to watch it because it is. I've seen clips and I've seen bits of it, and I know some of the guys in it in terms of I've seen them in other things, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
that I have to watch that. It's just, but at the same time, I feel like it's of an age. I don't know if it translates.
No, it's perfect.
Right, okay.
There were elements where I remember certain elements from the first episode. All I'm going to say, certain homework elements of the first episode is part of my growing up. So, yeah, it's a very you watch that and you'll know. But that and Brassic have just been like absolute. And
Nice.
and this country, living in Gloucester at the moment, this country has been. That is so round here, you've got no idea.
Amy watched that ages. Yeah. So last one: glass half full or half empty?
No glass.
What? And on that bombshell, we'll definitely end there.
Schrodinger's glass. There you go.
Nice. Keith, thank you very much for joining me today. This has been a blast. It's been really, really good to catch up with you and to share you with the rest of the world out there that does come across this and wants to watch it. So thanks again, and hopefully you had a good time.
Yeah, it was blast, man. It's nice hanging out with you again.
And you, yep. And well, we shall continue to while everyone else is going to go away now. So goodbye, everyone. Good night. Good morning, and everything that I said earlier. Bye.